Curtis, he says, I've been on a bit of a Lucha Underground kick lately, and I have been rewatching old matches, specifically the AR Fox Swerve death match. How much influence do you think Lucha Underground has had on modern wrestling? I would say modern wrestling has a lot of trios matches, which are in the style of Lucha Underground, as well as many big stars of today getting a major break there. Additionally, in the pandemic era, the cinematic matches took on a lot of influence, and took a lot of influence, rather, from the Lucha Underground filming style. Would you say that they had a major impact on the current wrestling we see weekly? Additionally, what are some of your favorite characters from Lucha Underground and some moments that stand out? I always loved your reviews of their weekly shows, and I know how much you enjoyed the product. Would love to give you a chance to glow about them on the podcast again. Hey, I don't mind taking you up on that. I'll happily glow about Lucha Underground. So you mentioned the trios matches. Trios matches have been a staple of Lucha Libre for decades, so I don't think you can attribute all the trios matches that we see on AEW television, or them having trios titles, to Lucha Underground. I think you can attribute it to the Lucha Libre influence on the show, and Tony Khan being a fan of it. But I do agree that the cinematic matches we saw from WWE and AEW during the pandemic, I do think that was something that was influenced by Lucha Underground. And that show gave people like Penta and Rey Fenix and Ricochet and Sammy Guevara and Brian Cage and Luchasaurus, gave them all exposure that got them noticed elsewhere. I mean, the Luchasaurus and Vibora characters, because that was the character that Luchasaurus portrayed on the show. He wore a very similar mask. It was like a lizard mask instead of a dinosaur mask, and they called him Vibora. You know, the similarities between the characters, it's just they're too similar that it would not be something that influenced his character in AEW. Pentagon was one of my favorite characters on the show. He probably was my favorite. He was my favorite character on the show. The Mil Muertes and Katrina pairing was perfect. It was like their Undertaker and Paul Bearer, although Paul Bearer was never easy on the eyes the way that Katrina was, but they had a similar dynamic going on. Even Famous B. Remember Famous B? I loved Famous B. If he still listens, shout out to Famous B. But it's still the greatest casket match I've ever seen in wrestling. If you want to see how a casket match should be done, check out the first Grave Consequences match between Rey Fenix and Mil Muertes from Season 1. You really should start from the beginning, though, because that way you'll know the stories going into the matches. That match, I know, is still up on their YouTube channel for free, so you can find it there. Another one is the second Aztec Warfare match they ever did. It was like their version of a Royal Rumble. They did a second one that had the debut of Jeff Cobb as the Monster Matanza. He was Dario Cueto's brother that he kept locked away in a cell. That was great. He also murdered lots of wrestlers and ate one of their faces off, so that was pretty cool. The All Night Long match, basically an Iron Man match that lasted the entire episode between Prince Puma and Johnny Mundo, or Ricochet and John Morrison. That was great. There was a gauntlet match where Pentagon had to wrestle each member of the Black Lotus Triad, intergender style. The Triad was Io Sky, Kairi Sane, and Mayu Iwatani. I've not seen that match in a while, but I remember it being pretty badass. I mean, how could it not be? Right? You got three of the greatest women's wrestlers in the world in one match. You mentioned the death match with Killshot and Dante Fox. The death match that Swerve had with Hangman in AEW was the spiritual successor to the one that he had with AR Fox on Lucha Underground. Just an absolutely violent spectacle of a match. I think that one was 3 Stages of Hell, but I forgot the name they gave it. But the finals of the Trios Championship Tournament has the moment that still sticks with me the most. They held these shows in a warehouse out in California that they made up to look like this fight club. And they called it the Temple because the idea is that it used to be a church. And I loved it because it was such a unique setting for a wrestling show, but it also had these platforms where, or I don't know, platforms are just ledges where sometimes the wrestlers would fight on. But near the end of this match, where it looked like all hope was lost for the babyfaces, and the 3 heels were about to gang up on Ivelisse in the ring, here comes Angelico. He built up a head of steam because he was laid out up on like the ledge somewhere, and it's like, oh, he's not going to make it in time, right? he builds up a head of steam, and he comes charging off the balcony, over the fans. He flies over the fans. He takes out all 3 heels in the ring with a crossbody. Everybody lost their minds. Vampiro throws his headset down. He starts running back and forth. It was just this incredible moment. So if there's one scene in the history of that show that I will never forget, it is the Angelico dive. If you search for the Angelico dive, you'll see it. But again, watch from the beginning, because the pairing of Son of Havoc, Angelico, and Ivelisse, they were thrown together. It took a while for them to gel as a team. And the moment is more meaningful, I think, if you knew everything they had to go through together to win those titles. It's too bad a lot of people got stuck in those shit contracts and they had to sue to get out of them. I think there were 7-year deals that they were committed to, or 7 seasons. 7 seasons. And the show only went 4, and it didn't get renewed, and everybody was sort of stuck in limbo. I really wish the show would have caught fire. It would have been able to continue and did better ratings, or at least get a proper ending. It deserved a proper ending. There's one more thing I'll add. It's as far as the role of general manager or authority figure in wrestling, there's never been a better one than Dario Cueto. He was I think they called him the proprietor. He was the proprietor of Lucha Underground. He was the dirtbag promoter who put this whole thing together. And they brought in an actor for it. And he is fantastic in that role. So Dario Cueto is still, to this day, the best authority figure in pro wrestling that I have ever seen. He was fantastic. So they got that right. There were a lot of things they got right. Unfortunately, they didn't get enough right to keep going, and they never really got a proper ending.